I'm here at ASW with Jim, their CEO. American Spirit Works has been around here in Atlanta since 2018. And since then, they've been America's most awarded craft distillery. And we've been working for the last several months on the VINwhiskey project. So thank you so much for coming along on the journey. So we're actually here to start the bottling process because we are celebrating a birthday. 8 years ago, this whiskey went into these barrels, not knowing at the time that it was going to be our first batch of VINwhiskey. But they make some amazing stuff here at ASW and different things they bring in and fiddle with. And so when I came to them with the idea, you said there were a few different things we could do, different concepts, different things. But of course, they're very shrewd negotiators here. So we met right smack dab in the middle at me making sure that we brought to you the best stuff that's ever come out of these doors. And now that it's 8 years old, we've proofed it down and we're gonna start bottling it. And I'm gonna walk you through that entire process. But thank you, Jim, for making it so much fun.
So happy to have you, brother.
And so easy. Now, as we've been going through the process with ASW over the last few months to put together the first offering of VINwhiskey, there's a few things that you do. The first thing is we wanted to pick out some very special barrels because over the 8 years of the aging process, there becomes a huge array of different tasting profiles. And so as we batched them together, we came up with something that I think is really, really perfect, just the way you want it. But of course, some of the more special barrels we're keeping out as single barrels. So my birthday is next week. I'm not turning 8 years old, but this one was the one that we thought was the absolute best. It's really chocolatey, a little bit of coffee, just to me, exactly what I want to taste after I'm telling a good story about some crazy car adventure. So Jim pulled out a few. He liked this one. I liked it more. And so this one we're going to bottle separately at its full proof, a little over 118 proof. But it doesn't always go that well. And the more interesting thing to look at right here is this barrel, which y'all opened up this morning, and it was empty.
Bone dry. So we have the full range of human emotion. We have pure happiness for your birthday barrel here.
And the done.
People on your show have probably heard of angel share, that you lose a little bit through, people think of evaporation, but sometimes you just have a bone dry barrel, and so this was the sad side of the equation. And it doesn't happen often, but this was 100% empty.
100% empty. Yeah. So far we've opened a handful of barrels. We don't have that many. You can't just make all the 8-year-old bourbon you want. And so it's going to be a limited run for VINwhiskey, but it's a little more limited than we anticipated because rather than losing about 4% or so a year, in this case, we lost it all. And so this one's a dud. This one's amazing. But whatever you get, it's going to be great once it's in the bottles. All right, Jonathan, how's this thing work?
All right, so you have the big tank hooked up back there. And we've got a hose that runs through up to this. And once we flip the compressor, you'll see it fills this miniature tank up. And then once the bottle's full, you just take a new one, spit it under, and then it'll all just fill out. They've got sensors in it that'll tell it when to stop.
Really?
So if you want to try, go ahead.
Perfect every time. So this guy comes off.
Yep.
This one goes on.
Perfect.
And that goes over here.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm a pro. Look at my assembly line right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Drops one immediately. Okay.
Basically, you just put it under here, give it a good crank, make sure the bottle's all clean, and then you pass it on to an even easier step.
And how often
give it a
do you
go?
misalign it and crack the whole thing?
That can happen, but hopefully it does not.
There's no chance that's going to happen on my first try.
You got it.
All right, so like this.
Mm-hmm.
and I've misaligned it already. I
No,
see.
it'll find its
Oh,
way
wait.
back. Don't worry.
Oh, you taught me well, Lexi. Okay.
Right.
We'd have to raise the stations just a little bit for 6'5" over here.
Yeah, as long as you get it in the crook.
In the
You're
crook.
good there, yep.
Is that a scientific
Beautiful.
term? All right. Well, I haven't wiped it. Get 'em.
Yeah, make them look beautiful.
Beautiful is the key. Not that important. We're gonna drink them fast.
On tight on the top. Make sure not to put any hands over here.
I will burn my face if I did this all day.
Lift on the bottom, about 3 seconds.
Oh, look at that perfection. All right. All right. We're not gonna do it by feel. We're gonna use the whole implement here. All right. This lives in here.
Yeah, and then slip from the bottom. It's a little gentle, lifting from the bottom makes it a
Oh,
little.
lifting it from the bottom. 2, 3.
There we go.
There we go. Ta-da. Excellent. Okay.
Hi.
And now your expertise.
Yes. So this is the labeling machine. It's pretty simple. You'll grab your bottle, put it on here, hit this button, and it's putting the back label on first, then the front, and then you're good to go to put the next one on.
Oh my goodness.
So you just want to wipe it. Perfect. That's really it, and then it just goes in the box after that.
Oh, so you're the rocket scientist of the operation. I love it.
Not really. But
Look at
here's
this.
your bottle.
Oh man.
Fold it up.
VINwhiskey. Yep. Oh, excellent. At the end of a long drive, as you're telling your best car stories, nothing pairs better than that with a nice glass of bourbon. And so I had the idea a year or two ago that we needed to have a VINwhiskey, but I didn't have the slightest idea of how one might accomplish that. And through some mutual friends, I got in touch with Jim and his team here at ASW and brought them the idea of really coming together to come up with something that would be, you know, just a really, really good, high-quality bourbon that I felt like our audience would love, and selfishly that I'd like to have on my whiskey shelf. And I think what we've come up with here in VINwhiskey with ASW is absolutely incredible. And Jim, I cannot thank you enough for making it possible.
Cheers, brother.
And this is the first time that I am going to taste it at our 110, double the speed limit proof. That felt like the right approach. So here
Yes,
we go.
everything you've had up to this point is right out of the barrel.
You know, so I love, you know, really big, initially hot, big mouth feel. I love notes of coffee, espresso, chocolate, butter, things like that. And I like that in, you know, what you'd see with something like Eagle Rare or Old Forester 1920, some of the Heaven Hill stuff. Like, I've got a pretty extensive whiskey collection because we do go through a fair amount of liquid courage at the VINwhiskey studio. But, I mean, this is exactly what I wanted it to be. When we tried each of the barrels, you know, some were a little more floral, some were a little bit more banana bread, bubblegummy, but to me, this, as we batched it all together, so this is 6 barrels into one, as we pulled out my favorite bottle, which you can also buy, but really trying to come up with something that was down the middle and perfect, and man, I think you nailed it.
I think you're exactly right. I think it's very oak forward for people that like that, which is what most of our consumers like. Obviously, with an 8-year-old whiskey, been in a barrel a long time to be able to pick up that oak flavor. But it is also right down the middle, as you said. There's a lot of caramel in here. There's a lot of vanilla. There's also a little bit of a kind of a burnt sugar type thing, like a sugar candy, that I think is excellent, and I think people are going to love this.
For sure. And of course, it'll evolve a little bit. We're batching several barrels, but it is a fairly limited run. And if you'd like to come out to our launch event here at ASW in Atlanta on October 20th, we'd love to have you. And I'll have a link to tickets in the description below. You can pre-order bottles, buy the 1 bottle, a case, whatever you're looking to do. But that's going to be a whole lot of fun. If you're not in Atlanta and you'd like to order it online, there are ways that you can have it delivered. So we'll also have a link for that as well. Now, one of the most fun parts of the process has been designing the label.
It looks
and
great.
so as a partnership with you guys at ASW, we have your normal kind of structure, but obviously we took it to the moon and back trying to make VINwhiskey stand out on the shelf. And I love the bottle. I think that it's the right shape. It's taller than the rest, which is absolutely a good thing.
But we did some mods.
That's exactly right. And of course, a lot of the design language is based on my 2007 Lamborghini Murcielago LP640, the car that I bought, really rough in black. It's now painted Verde Draco. It's now the highest mileage one in the US. It's got our wheel, the titanium Hercules wheel next to your logo, and the fiddler design with a shot by Larry Yanovich from Winning Automotive Photography, our gated community release. I just think it sums up so much about my favorite car, what is now absolutely and quite honestly my favorite bourbon, and I could not be any happier.
It looks great. It's done great. The colors went really, really well together, and I think we designed a winner, and the mods ended up working out with a classic design.
Now, VINwhiskey is a bourbon, but Jim, we are conspicuously not in Kentucky.
That's right. So we partner with the largest bourbon distillery in the world, which is actually not in Kentucky. It's in Indiana. And we buy from them a wheated bourbon.
Right.
So bourbon, I'm going to tell you this, and then someone's going to try to fight you at a car show, but you'll be right. I can't promise you win the fight. Bourbon has to be at least 51% corn, has to be made in the United States, not necessarily Kentucky, has to be distilled at less than 80% alcohol by volume, has to be stored in new charred oak barrels like the ones you were picking from earlier.
They're not new anymore.
Yeah, now they're empty charred oak barrels. And so if you have those four things and it's entered into that barrel at under 125 proof, then it's bourbon. And by the way, it's bourbon immediately. Bourbon is bourbon as soon as it goes in one of those barrels.
So there's not an aging requirement.
No, this one, if you notice, says straight bourbon whiskey. That means it's at least 2 years old. Obviously, yours is 8 years old. But bourbon is bourbon as soon as it hits that new barrel. If he says on a bottle, if you see it says bonded or bottled in bond, then it's at least 4 years old. But straight bourbon whiskey means it's at least 2 years old. Bourbon standalone does not imply an age.
Excellent. So our mash bill is 51% corn, 45% wheat, meaning it is a wheated bourbon.
That's right.
And 4% barley. Now, how much wheat would it have to be wheated?
It just has to have wheat in it. So the main thing, almost all the bourbons that you and I have talked about in the past and things that we, as you were envisioning this project, almost all the bourbons we talked about, save a few, are, remember, it has to be 51% corn.
Right.
But the next ingredient is usually rye. This, instead of it being rye, is wheat. So a wheated bourbon is very popular right now. So Pappy Van Winkle is a wheated bourbon. Maker's Mark is a wheated bourbon. Weller. So that means instead of it being number 1 corn, number 2 rye, number 1 corn, number 2 wheat. This is 45% wheat. So this is the heaviest wheater than most of your viewers will ever see. So this is 2 or 3 times the wheat content of most other wheated bourbons. And that, for us, has worked out well because one of the reasons we call it fiddler is we usually do something to it. We fiddle with it. We add value to it. So basically this is fiddler unfiddled.
Unfiddled.
Because it's an 8-year-old and we didn't want to mess with it because it was really, really well done on its own. But that 45% wheat is a little bit softer, typically gives us a smoother, longer finish, and it works for us to play with it and do things to it. But at 8 years old, it actually worked out really well on its own, as you can see.
I love it. I love it. I'm so happy with what we came up with. I don't know how many we're going to make. I think we're going to probably do a few thousand bottles for right now, and we'll see how that goes. It will be limited, and then we'll see what happens in the future as the partnership for the ongoing VINwhiskey continues.
Should be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So cheers. Check them out. Come see us in Atlanta. Otherwise, enjoy it and let us know what you think.